Hey everybody, welcome back again. The college application process, part 8 for rising seniors and anyone else who wants to know. Moms and dads, this is the big one to pay attention to. Part number 8 is the first one of a few about financial aid and paying for college. This one is just going to be the basics, talking a little bit about need-based financial aid and where to find it. So, it all starts with this wonderful and wild thing known as the FAFSA. And I'm going to just set this screen up a little bit so that you can see what I'm looking at here. And FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, FAFSA. And it is from the federal government, and it is often misunderstood. It is not the source of financial aid. It is a form that you fill out that measures what the government thinks you as a family can contribute to a college education. And from there, both the universities and the federal government programs that help provide money for college education can determine the amount of money that they need to dole out to different families. So I'm going to take you through this just a little bit to kind of tell you that it's not a form that you need to be afraid of. It's not an overly difficult form. Occasionally there's a few little glitches, especially if you're a first-time user of it. It's new, and that's where it's confusing. It's not confusing because by itself it's hard to do. The one thing that I would say is you're going to have to create a user ID for the parent. You're going to have to create a user ID for the student, and you have to you absolutely positively have to remember those user IDs, the email address, the password, and the PIN. Most of the problems that I see with the form actually come from logging out, logging back in, and not being able to do it because you got the PIN number or the user ID wrong. Once you get locked out of it, because it is your private financial information, it's hard to get back in. So, so just remember that, and make sure you write all of this down. The things that you're going to need when you sit down to fill out the FAFSA form, and for the vast majority of people, you're going to be able to do this in one sitting. If you have your income tax return from the most recent year that you have, so you are applying for the this coming year. This is the year 2020. So the last taxes that you have done and submitted to the government are your 2019 taxes. That tax form is essentially the most important piece that you're going to need when you fill out this form. The other thing that you might want to have is a bank statement, so that because it is going to ask questions about savings and checking and how much money you have there. And as well as information about mortgages. You know, if you have a mortgage on your house, you might want to have a statement where you can, that reports what you pay in interest and what balance you have left to pay on your house. Other than that, it's pretty simple. And by the way, you have to have the same information for the student. So if the student has had a job and has completed a tax return, the student needs that as well as the balances of any bank accounts. So those are the things that you need. Once you have that, you can sit down and go. My biggest recommendation about completing the FAFSA form is have the student sit down with you. This is one of those things, and I myself as a parent have done this in the past and regretted it a little bit. Have the students sit with you so that they fully understand and can learn a little bit about the enormity of the amount of money that we're talking about in terms of funding the college education. So the more the student understands, then the more cooperative they will be with the parents, and it'll be a little bit more of a team effort. So they should have to sit down and do this with the parent, without a doubt. Okay, so with that said, going through the FAFSA, I like this article that I found right here online. collegedata.com, 10 FAFSA facts every college-bound student should know. And this just about covers it. FAFSA, what it stands for, I've already told you, free application for federal student aid. You shouldn't have to pay for it. If you go to FAFSA.gov, you'll be able to create an account and get started. You do not pay a nickel for it. The first F in the acronym is free. It's an application for federal student aid, so it's only an application for the financial aid that the federal government provides. Those are things like Pell Grants, Perkins loans, and they do have a program for its federal work-study funds. So we'll talk about that a bit. You should file your FAFSA even if you don't think you're going to qualify for financial aid. I've talked to several families, and you're in that income bracket where you might not get any of those awards, any of that need-based financial aid. But nevertheless, you should still fill out the FAFSA, because you may find that the university that you're going to requires it as a part of your application, and also for consideration of any institutional-based aid. So you go to Northwestern University, you're going to go out to the Chicago area, and it's a school that maybe we here in Maine don't know as much about, and you're not going to get a Pell Grants or Perkins loan, so you don't bother filling out the FAFSA. But lo and behold, Northwestern requires the FAFSA, and they use the data in the FAFSA to determine how they give out the financial aid for their institution. So always make sure that you fill out the FAFSA. It is also something that you have to fill out every year while you're in college. So you fill it out once for when the student is applying to college to get in as a first-year student, but then every year after that, you have to reapply for financial aid. So you have to do that every year. The FAFSA asks for information about both students and parents. If the student is unmarried and under 24 years old, they are still considered a dependent student as opposed to an independent person. So if the student gets married, has children, and they're still under 24, they are considered independent, and the parent no longer is part of the financial aid consideration. One of the big questions about that is about divorced families or blended families with step-parents. And essentially the way this works is when parents are divorced, then this is different based on many different situations, but simply put, only one of the biological parents would then be considered as somebody that was required to put the information into the FAFSA. And that is generally the parent that the student spends 50% or more of their time with. If that parent has remarried, however, interestingly enough, the step-parent's income does count as part of the income that will be calculated into the federal student aid. The FAFSA doesn't tell you how much financial aid you'll receive. It calculates a number called the EFC, or Expected Family Contribution. That number, if a family is very low income, that number, the EFC, could be 0. And that means that the family's income is not sufficient to pay any of the cost of college. That means that a student with an EFC of 0 would receive the maximum amount of financial aid available through the federal government. And then the number goes up from there. So if you have an EFC of $25,000, that is basically telling you that the federal government thinks that your family can afford to pay $25,000 a year for towards the college education. It's also important to understand that that number means you don't pay $25,000 that year, that the cost of that year's education of $25,000 is something that you can pay out over 10, 12, 14 years, whatever. That it's, in other words, it's an amount of debt that you can take on. A lot of people look at it differently. They say, well, I don't have that much money every year, and the federal government doesn't expect you to be able to pay your student loans and all of those sorts of things within one calendar year. They think it's an amount of debt that you can take on. Because I promise you, for a lot of you, that EFC number is going to be a little bit shocking at first. You're going to look at it and go, oh my gosh, I can't do that. Or it's a lot higher than you would have liked it to be. So now, with that said, the colleges that you apply to will use the EFC number to also determine financial aid that they give on a need-based situation, which is based on your family resources and income. They use the EFC number to then also give financial aid from the institutions. State institutions like the University of Maine are already funded by the federal government to a certain degree. You're going to find that state universities don't give out a lot of need-based aid, but private institutions will. So it's not unusual for you to see an institution to have an extremely high price tag, $60,000, $70,000, $75,000 a year to attend that school. But they do usually have endowments where they can tap into that to provide need-based financial aid for students. So that's kind of the long story about what the FAFSA will tell you. The first day that you can access and submit the FAFSA is October 1. There is absolutely nothing that you can do between now and October 1 with regards to financial aid. A lot of people contact me wondering if they've missed deadlines and those sorts of things. If you have a rising senior in your home, they're going to be applying to college this fall, there is nothing you can do about financial aid until October 1. You should apply for the FAFSA. You should get online and do this job sometime between October 1 and December 1. Some schools do have financial aid deadlines. If you get it done, usually by Thanksgiving, you're all set. If a student is applying early action, early decision, one of the arrangements in an early action or early decision application is that the university will, in addition to their acceptance letter, they will also provide a financial aid letter at the same time. So you need to get your FAFSA done early in that scenario. So the families that are right on top of it are doing the FAFSA in October. You can complete the entire FAFSA on your phone or online. You don't have to fill out a single piece of paper. It is an online form. It's that website that I showed you right here. So new to the FAFSA process, you get started. If you're a returning user going back to complete something you already started, you log in. But it can all be done right online. You can select up to 10 colleges to receive your FAFSA information. So you do not have to send your FAFSA information to schools. FAFSA will send it for you. When you fill out the FAFSA, there's a spot there for 10 schools that you can identify that accept federal financial aid, and you can you just put in their names there, and they will electronically transmit your financial aid information to the colleges. Some people ask, well, does financial aid impact the admission decision? You're going to find that most colleges will tell you that their admissions decisions are need blind. So they don't look at your FAFSA information prior to making a decision to accept you. most financial aid information that goes to a college goes directly to a financial aid office that is separate from the admissions office. So I'm sure there are exceptions out there somewhere, but generally speaking, colleges do admissions on a need-blind basis, and that is in line with ethics and really with human rights to give everybody a fair and equal shot at admission. FAFSA help is available. Even when you're sitting entirely by yourself and you're filling out the form, there are little question bubbles that you can click on that will explain a line. If you don't know what they're asking for, it'll even tell you, go to line whatever on your 1040 tax return and enter the number there. There's a lot of support and help. But at the end of this video, I'm going to give you, you want to talk to somebody in person, I'll give you a connection before we end where somebody can really help you. Changes in your family financial situation that occur after you sign the FAFSA usually cannot be updated. They can't be updated in the FAFSA form. So let's say you fill out your FAFSA October 1, and then the middle of October you are laid off from your job. Well, that's a significant financial disruption. You're not going to necessarily be able to go back into FAFSA and change that, because that is a piece of information that will not show up on your tax return from 2019. However, what you can do is you can talk to the financial aid office at the school where you've applied and let them know that your financial situation has changed since you completed the FAFSA. And then they can make corrections, not mistakes, hopefully. They can make corrections on the side of the university. Okay, you might be selected for verification. One of the things that to make sure that there is a that people are being truthful within this system is you may be randomly selected for an audit, basically, is what it is, to make sure that everything in your application is truthful. Now, one of the things that makes it so much easier in the FAFSA to prevent you from making a mistake is you can do the IRS upload. So if you did your tax return electronically, you can, in fact, just go in and instead of typing in all of the information from your paper copy of your tax return, you can tell it to pull the information from the IRS and it just populates your form. So that's a great way to prevent yourself from making a mistake on the FAFSA. But just remember, if there's a mistake on your taxes, there will then also be a mistake on your FAFSA. So it's always important to double check those things. One other form that I need to alert you to: if you are applying to any private institutions, private universities that do that have their own endowments of financial aid to give out, very often they will require you to do another financial aid form in addition to the FAFSA. This one is called the CSS Profile. The CSS Profile is at this link right here, and you can find it in your College Board account. College Board helps to manage the CSS Profile, and there is a fee with this. It's about $90. It's expensive to fill out. But it helps to bring another degree of fairness to the awarding of financial aid. It takes a little bit more into account other than just income. It also looks at assets, and not retirement funds, not your primary residence, but if you also have boats and vacation homes and all of these other kinds of things, those will also be taken into consideration as assets. So it paints a better picture of the family's financial situation as well as where you've allocated your resources. So it is a little bit more, it asks some of the same questions as the FAFSA, but it goes a little bit further into those other things as well. and so you would have to do that. Now, if you have any questions about the FAFSA or financial aid, we here at the school counseling office at Bangor High School, we are school counselors and we know a lot of information about these things. However, if you want a true financial expert, my recommendation is that you contact the ladies at the Finance Authority of Maine, and they have a web page right here, famemaine.com/education. And right here you can have input on filing the FAFSA, learning about other types of financial aid. They will help you with strategies for paying for college, and a number of other things. So it's a great resource. They're super friendly, they're super helpful, and they are wicked smart. So they're going to be a great resource for you to use. Now, the kinds of financial aid that you're likely to see from the federal government, it's important to know the difference between grants and loans. Grants are money that you don't have to pay back. Loans, you have to pay it back. Some are subsidized, some are unsubsidized. But all of that information will be coming up in one of the next videos. So stay tuned, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of those very specific financial aid situations. This was just to kind of show you the forms and help you understand the responsibilities that you have in making sure that you meet deadlines and requirements to actually get your financial aid. So I hope this was helpful, and look forward to having you join us for the next video. Have a great day.